Okay guys, today I want to give you a video related to the Turkish Get Up to point out one thing you're probably doing incorrectly with the positioning of your ribs. It has a huge impact to the Turkish Get Up and the strength development you get from that movement. Also has a huge impact in many other movements. I'm also going to talk about how it can have an impact and how that then applies to you training and fighting Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. Let's get into it. Okay guys, what I'm going to talk about now in terms of ribcage positioning is very important. It has a lot of application to strength and conditioning. It has a lot of application to general overall health of the spine and the back, and has a lot of application to Jiu-Jitsu. So pay attention to the details, really take note of this one. What I mean by good rib positioning is I don't want the line, think of two imaginary lines, one coming straight out of my sternum around the bottom of my ribs, and then one coming from the pelvis. And imagine you've got two parallel lines coming out. If I open my ribs up too much and my pelvis is tilted forward, you can imagine two lines coming out diagonally away from each other. What we're trying to get is two parallel lines between the rib cage and the pelvis. And what this is doing is fully engaging the core and taking off a lot of the strain from the back, and particularly the lower back, which is a whole subject in itself. Make sure you check out the free ebook in the description below if you're having lower back pain problems, by the way. But when you bring your ribcage and pelvis into this position, the glutes activate more effectively, the core is active. Yes, you're still using the muscles up and down the spine, but the real workhorses in terms of spinal stability should be the core and the glutes primarily. So it's a very important idea and has a lot of application for many movements, and I'll talk about it in terms of the Turkish Get Up in a second. But first let me tell you, why is it important for Jiu-Jitsu? And what I want you to do is two things. I want you to get a partner at some point and stand in this I know this is not a wrestling stance, right? A wrestling stance would be more in this kind of position, but quite often we can be in this kind of position. Whether the feet are staggered or not is kind of irrelevant. But for the purpose of this exercise, stand with your feet together, and rather than standing in this position with the chest open and the head up, which we're quite often told is good posture, well, first of all, actually stand like this and get someone to pull you forward, versus pulling the ribcage down and tilting the pelvis up so the core is far more engaged, and then get someone to pull you forward. And one of two things is going to happen. When you're in this hyper-extended position, either you're going to come forward far more easily, or you're going to feel a hell of a lot more strain up and down through the spine, through the neck and through the lower back. And when you're in this position, you're going to feel a lot stronger and a lot more stable, again with the ribcage down and pelvis up rather than hyper-extended. And the other example is going to be in closed guard. So if you're sitting in someone's closed guard, quite often we're told like this, head up, which often means pulling the chin up for many people and opening up the chest. Now get someone with their legs around you, and without using your arms, ask them to pull you forward with their legs, versus tilting the pelvis forward, pulling the rib cage down and tucking the chin into this strong, stable position. And you're going to find it's much easier to maintain an upright position with this kind of stable position with the rib cage down and the pelvis tucked. Of course, then in Jiu-Jitsu you start bringing in your arms into it, but first and foremost we want to be working from this strong, stable spinal position. And it's a thing that people miss in many exercises, particularly in the Turkish Get Up, which I'll get to in a second. But think about it in terms of deadlifts. Deadlifts is another example where people are coming up from the bottom of the movement and they'll do this, okay? And if we train our bodies to always open up the rib cage and lose this position with the spine, the neural pathways we need to fire to maintain that position, we're not training them. So there's no chance in hell that we're suddenly going to recruit those neural pathways when we're fighting Jiu-Jitsu. So we've got to train in a way off the mat that's going to be applicable to what we need on the mat. And to use a phrase from Dean Lister, and he used this for leg locks, but I think this applies very well here. When we open up like this, our core is pretty much turned off as opposed to this position with the rib cage down and the pelvis tucked. Why ignore 50% of the human body, right? I think that's the D-list term, and I think it applies very, very well here. So now let's bring it down into the Turkish Get-Up. And I've got a video I'll link below that's going to go into specifics of all of the elements of the Turkish Get-Up, but particularly for this movement. When we're lying down like this, we don't want to be hyperextended with the back. We want to bring the rib cage down, and this is where we start. This is where we build our stable position with which to work from. This is where we build our foundation. So we pull the rib cage down and the pelvis up. That's going to make getting up into the air much, much easier. And then from there, we don't want to hyperextend. Again, keep the rib cage down. And this is really going to transform the exercise for you, I promise. And then we're going to come up into this position. And this is another really common position where people hyperextend. But like coming through here, if I hyperextend here, I'm off balance. It's much harder for me, even without the weight. I'm far more off balance than as opposed to this strong position with my rib cage and my hips. And from there, I'm going to come up into a standing position, and here is the last place where people quite often hyperextend. Make sure you maintain that position right throughout. So I'll demonstrate really quickly with a kettlebell. So rib cage down, pelvis up. I maintain that position as I sit up. I do not hyperextend. See, I become unstable very, very quickly. So I maintain that position, come up, keeping the rib cage down, strong and stable in the core. Then come up, and I don't hyperextend like this. I pull that rib cage down, shoulder blade down, pelvis pointed up, and repeat the process, going back down. As I said, this applies to many different exercises, but I wanted to talk about it particularly for the Turkish Get-Up because of the multitude of different positions it puts you in. It's really great for training this strong, stable spinal position and the position in the rib cage. And also, because of the different positions, it's maybe more important than any other exercise so you don't get into problems. So, as you can see, I'm working hard because the Turkish Get-Up for me is probably the #1 exercise. Maybe for Jujitsu. Anyway, there's some links below, all of that good stuff. Free ebook for lower back pain, which I mentioned. Leave a comment for me, let me know, can you think of any other examples where this may apply? Any other ways we can take this discussion and some things you'd like to see in the future. And while you're here, subscribe to the channel. Guys, thank you for watching. I'll see you next time.